Today, we're going to talk about something that's happening all around us, a kind of silent health crisis that's being driven by chemicals that have become, well, a normal part of our modern world. Let me start with a question that might sound a little weird. Is your receipt making you sick? I know, it sounds crazy, but that little piece of paper you probably have in your wallet right now, it's coated in a chemical that can get absorbed right through your skin. And honestly, that's just one tiny example of the countless exposures we all face every single day.
You see, that receipt is really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. There is a silent health crisis going on, and it's being fueled by chemicals that have worked their way into everything: our food, our water, the products we use without a second thought. And these are not just some abstract pollutants out there somewhere. They're having real, measurable, and frankly, often devastating effects on our bodies.
So how does this actually work, on a biological level? To really get a handle on the threat, we first have to understand the science of what's being disrupted.
I want you to think about your body for a second. It's like this incredibly complex society, and it absolutely relies on a perfect communication network to function. Well, that network is your endocrine system. It uses hormones as little messengers to control basically everything: your growth, your mood, your metabolism, and, this is a big one, reproduction. It's a super sensitive system that needs exactly the right messages delivered at exactly the right time. Now imagine a hacker breaking into that communication network and just scrambling all the messages. That's pretty much exactly what endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, do. These are chemicals that mess with your body's hormones. Some of them act like imposters, mimicking your natural hormones and sending out fake signals. Others just block the real messages from ever getting where they need to go. Either way, the result is total chaos in your body's command and control center.
And here's the crazy part. These signal-scrambling hackers, they're everywhere. We're talking about things like phthalates, which are in cosmetics and food packaging; BPA, which lines your canned foods and, is on those receipts; atrazine, an herbicide that ends up in our drinking water; and PFAS, you might have heard of these, the forever chemicals in things like nonstick pans. They are, quite literally, hiding in plain sight.
So how are they getting inside of us? Well, they leach out of plastic containers when you heat up your leftovers. Chemicals like atrazine run off from farms into rivers and then right into our tap water. And other pollutants, they build up in the food chain, getting more and more concentrated in the meat and fish we eat. The big takeaway here is that it's not just one chemical here or there. We're being exposed to a constant, low-dose cocktail of these things day in and day out.
All right, so now let's talk about what this constant chemical assault is actually doing to our bodies, because the documented health impacts, they're staggering.
Get this. Over the last 50 years, which, by the way, lines up perfectly with the explosion in making these synthetic chemicals, male reproductive health has been in an absolute freefall. This isn't some fringe theory. It is a well-documented scientific reality.
And no, this is not a coincidence. It is a direct result of chemical interference. A lot of these EDCs, like the phthalates in plastic and the BPA in cans, have what are called anti-androgenic effects. That means they directly attack testosterone, the main male sex hormone, by messing with its production and blocking it from doing its job.
But the damage isn't just about reproduction. It's neurological too. These chemicals can cross the blood-brain barrier. They launch a direct assault on the brain. We see phthalates being linked to ADHD-like behaviors. BPA is associated with anxiety and hyperactivity, and older pollutants like PCBs and certain pesticides are linked to actual measurable drops in IQ. We are talking about chemicals that can change how our brains develop and how they function.
But maybe the most sinister part of all this is how it can program our bodies for disease way down the road. Exposure to these things in the womb or as a little kid doesn't just cause problems right away. It can permanently change how our organs develop, basically setting the stage for diseases like cancer to show up decades later. It is, for all intents and purposes, a biological time bomb.
Which, of course, brings us to a huge question. If the science is this clear, why on earth are these chemicals still everywhere? And that leads us to the system itself, a system that appears to be failing.
This is the question we should all be asking, right? We have agencies like the FDA and the EPA. Their entire job description is to make sure our food, our water, and our products are safe. We're taught to trust them, so what went wrong?
Let's just look at one example: phthalates in our food. Back in 2016, health advocates went to the FDA with tons of evidence and asked them to ban these things. The agency just went silent. For years. It got so bad that the advocates had to literally sue the FDA just to get an answer. And the final decision in 2022? Petition denied. So chemicals that are banned from kids' toys are still allowed in our food with the blessing of the very agency we trust to protect us.
The reason for this paralysis really comes down to a battle of ideas. On one side, you have the precautionary principle, basically better safe than sorry. If there's a credible threat, you act. But on the other side, the one favored by industry and regulators, is the proof of harm model. Think of it as innocent until proven guilty for chemicals. This model demands absolute, conclusive proof of harm in humans, which can take decades to get. And while we're all waiting for this impossible standard to be met, the exposure just keeps going. The system is basically designed for inaction.
And that inaction? It is not an accident. It is engineered. So let's pull back the curtain and look at the forces that have consistently put profit ahead of public health.
You know, the chemical industry has a playbook, and it's a playbook that was perfected by big tobacco. The goal isn't to actually win the scientific argument. The goal is to create the illusion of a debate. You manufacture doubt by funding your own studies that, surprise, give conflicting results. You aggressively attack the work of independent scientists, and you lobby like crazy to keep that impossible proof of harm standard in place. It guarantees decades of delay while your products stay on the shelves.
And they back this playbook up with a ton of money, $65 million. That is how much the chemical and manufacturing industry spent on federal lobbying in 2022 alone. This isn't a fair scientific debate. It's a war where public health is just constantly outgunned and outspent.
But the real story, the absolute smoking gun, it doesn't come from their press releases or some government report. It comes from the industry's own secret, confidential files. And this is where we see just how dangerous it is to blindly trust what we're being told.
The history here is just stunning. As far back as the 1960s, companies knew from their own internal studies that these PFAS chemicals were toxic and were building up in people's blood. But did they share that information? Nope. It was stamped confidential and buried deep, all to protect profits. The public was told everything was fine, while internally, they knew it wasn't. That wasn't ignorance, it was a deliberate strategy.
So let's just call this what it is. This crisis is not some accident or a bit of negligence. When a company knows its product is causing harm and actively chooses to hide that fact for decades, that is, as the source material puts it, systemic corporate malfeasance for financial gain. The damage to all of us isn't some unforeseen side effect. It's a direct and disregarded consequence of putting profits above people.
And that really just leaves us with one last haunting question. If the motive behind all of this concealment and delay is profit, then what is the true cost? What is the price that we and our children are all paying in our health, our fertility, and the well-being of generations to come?